is now being recorded.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining the webcast today. My name is Rhonda Wilhite, and I am the Awards and Chapter Relations Associate. And joining me today to talk about their experience preparing for the PACE Award are Pam Weimer, Colorado Chapter, and you're going to have to tell me how you pronounce that name again. I'm sorry.
Mira Para.
Thank you. So today we're going to talk about some important deadlines before we let our facilitators talk. June the 4th is the deadline to submit your PACE nomination. You have until 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. June 29th is the date of the PACE Committee conference call. Results may not be shared until July 9th due to the holiday the following week. August 27th is the date of the award ceremony to be held at PWX in Kansas City, Missouri. At this time, I would like to have our co-facilitators discuss their experiences. And Pam, would you like to begin? And then Mira, you can go second.
All right. Well, thanks, Rhonda. I appreciate the opportunity to share our experience. So the way that the Colorado chapter prepared to submit was that we reviewed the criteria, the best practices, and submittal information the year prior to the year that we would submit for. So we submitted in 2017 for the year 2016, so we actually started the review process and going through things in 2015. And we did that to ensure that we would have eligibility, but then also to look at the areas that we thought maybe we were weak in or needed to work on, and we just wanted to make sure that we would be able to hit all the marks. The other thing that we did was we requested submissions from Rhonda to get some samples so that we could review those, and I would really recommend doing that. There's a lot of information that you put into a nomination, and it's really helpful to see how other chapters have organized it and formatted it. It kind of gives you a little bit of a roadmap in putting all that information together. The other thing that we did was we discussed areas of concern that we had, areas that we thought we needed to work on, and we kept discussing those at board meetings. So that was a good way of making sure that we stayed on track. We continued to work on areas that we thought we needed to, and then kept track of all the other information as well. And then last spring when we got ready to nominate, we had some board members, I had 4 of them that volunteered to work on the submission with me, and we broke it up into sections so that each of the board members took a section. They highlighted areas that they were going to address in those sections and then did some of the writing. And then that was also helpful in the review process because I think as most of you probably encounter, you can't attend every APWA event, but somebody else does, and they might remember something that the chapter does and wants to make sure that that's highlighted in the submission as well. So I thought that was really helpful in getting ready to prepare. The benefits that I think you receive from submitting the PACE Award are that I think it's a little bit like a mini APWA accreditation on a much smaller level. But what it allows you to do is to review your best practices as a chapter and see areas that you need to improve on, as well as what you're doing well. So there's things that you recognize that maybe you can work on, get better at, but you also recognize those areas that you can build on. And then I think moving from year to year, hopefully being able to submit for the PACE each year annually allows us to look at those benchmarks, make sure we're meeting them. It also allows for discussion as you have new members, join your board, whether they're as directors or as your officers change. And it kind of keeps that creative kind of new idea flowing, and I think that's a good way to keep addressing all of those best practices. Lessons that we learned to make the submittal process simpler this year was one thing we wanted to make sure that we had enough nominations submitted as well as the top 10 leader of the year. And so we worked on encouraging not only our award winners, but our nominees to submit their projects and programs at the national level. And then to also work with the agency where our top 10 leader worked, so that if they needed help with putting the submission together, that sort of thing, that we would be available to them. We also had board members that volunteered to review submissions before an agency might want to submit it to national. Just gave them that extra set of eyes on it. And probably the best advice I could give is start early. It really helps to get going and allow yourself that time to get yourself organized and have that time to review everything.
Okay, Pam, I have a question. How long had it been since the Colorado chapter submitted for a PACE? It had been quite a few years, hadn't it?
It had been, and I actually asked that question, and nobody had that answer for me, even some of our longtime board members. So we're guessing it was well over 10 years, maybe longer.
So that was one of the reasons why I asked her to kind of share her experiences for those chapters who had not done this yearly or maybe had taken a break and don't remember when was the last time. And I think you guys, it seems like you have a very good strategy, and I want to thank you for sharing that.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Mira.
Hi. Yes, I'm Mira Parra. I'm with the Louisiana Chapter. I was the past president last year and chapter president the year before. So we have a rotation on our officers, and so this year it'll be somebody else submitting. The president last year, which was James Capesis. So our chapter is set up maybe a little bit different than some chapters. We have 3 branches, and all the activities are pretty much hosted at the branch level. And the chapter kind of helps coordinate between branch activities. And when we're submitting our PACE award, we work very closely with the chapter delegate, who submits, I guess, quarterly reports, kind of outlining our activities. And from those quarterly reports, we're able to compile pretty much everything that we put together for our PACE application. And since somebody else had done it the year prior to me filling out the application, I had, a pretty good template to use for the year that I did it, which was for 2016. I guess some of the key things are you want to make sure you meet the minimum criteria, which I guess you probably wouldn't be notified that you're eligible if you didn't meet the minimum criteria, which I think for us the key thing was the awards and having a chapter award nomination. And let's see what else. I guess one thing that I would say as far as advice would be make sure that you take lots of pictures at all your events, because that really helps when you're putting your application together. So, and I guess I also want to say, what Pamela said, we basically followed it, kind of the same procedure, just going through the best practices. I'm thankful that Pamela went first because I wasn't very prepared. But I guess that's it. Any questions?
Okay, well, I have a question. Now, Louisiana had is this your 3rd year that you submitted, if I'm remembering correctly?
So I think
how many?
we submitted in 2014, for 2014, 2015, and 2016 so far. So 2014 was the first year that we submitted. I think we didn't make it in 2014. I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah, I think you got a letter of regrets, yeah.
Right.
Okay, and as we get further into this webcast, that's another reason why I asked Louisiana, because they're new too, and because they have a letter of regrets, and we'll talk about that further. And that's what can happen. There are three things that could happen when you submit your chapter's nomination. You could get a letter of congratulations, you could get a letter of concerns, or you could get a letter of regrets. With concerns, what usually triggers this letter from the judges are a lack of chapter-sponsored community service and too many agency-driven community service programs. Also, improvements in documentation. You might get a letter that says that, or both. This would be, improvement in documentation would be not giving detail or substantiating the chapter's achievement, not addressing everything in the criteria. The judges may know of some programs you are doing, but you don't mention them. Most non-addressed items are sustainability, advocacy, and community service. The nomination contains a lot of old information that happened years ago rather than reporting on the previous calendar year of January 1 through December 31st. So that's the year that your nomination should concentrate on. The judges, I don't know if any, some of you do, some of the ones that I've done this every year, but the judges are our APWA president, the immediate past president, the president-elect, and then the three most current past presidents. So I should have just said it like that. So those are the ones that are judging the nominations. Those are the ones that have been to most of the chapters, visiting them. They kind of know what you're doing. They're reading. If you miss something big that maybe they thought, why didn't they mention this? You might get a trigger of not documenting adequately. So that could trigger that. That's some of the concerns. So when you get this letter of concerns, if you may get this letter of concerns in the future, if you haven't already. I know some chapters have gotten them and maybe are on the webcast. If you don't address those letter of concerns in your next year's nominations, you could be finding that you might be getting a letter of regrets. So, some of the things that we were talking about earlier, and I had sent to everyone, was some chapter-sponsored community service. And some of these ideas I kind of put together. I don't know if any of you have ever visited Pinterest, but Pinterest has wonderful ideas on community service. Some of the other ideas that you could do is support your local food bank, your schools, your city departments that are looking for volunteers, and a lot of you work for cities, so you know this. You can clean highways, creeks, paint over graffiti, help clean up after a natural disaster. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I've sent everyone on this call a resource called 30 Community Service Project Ideas and Resources. For those of you viewing this on the YouTube channel after the recording, you can find this paper on the Chapter Leader Resources area of the APWA website under Awards, or you can contact me directly at rwilhite@apwa.net. Does anyone like to share, those of you who read what I sent, and you can see this one slide, is there anything on there that your chapter has contributed as a community service that was a success or something that wasn't mentioned? If you would like to share that now, that would be great. And don't forget to unmute your phone to do so. Okay, with that said, we'll move on. The lack of documentation. As we mentioned, that's going to be another trigger to get your letter of concerns. If you need to improve your documentation, address everything in the criteria, even if you don't do it. Just because you're not doing something doesn't mean you will be disqualified. If you address why or what is prohibiting your chapter from doing that item listed on the criteria, it's going to be better for you. They want to at least see why, or maybe what you've done in the past to try to accomplish it. They want it addressed. They don't want it skipped, so don't skip it. That could trigger a letter of need for documentation. Chapters are not judged against other chapters, but on the criteria alone. So it is important you address everything. Most non-addressed items are sustainability, advocacy, and community service. Again, these three items seem to be appearing. And so if you have any ideas in ways that we can improve those three areas for you as a chapter, you can send that information to me as well. And Dan, you have asked, given that the PACE should document activities from January 1st to December 31st, 2017, which award season should be included? 2017 awards ceremony for projects submitted in December 2016 or 2018 awards ceremony. You should be, if you want to talk about what awards you received, you can talk about the ones received in the 2017 awards ceremony. It probably wouldn't hurt to talk about those that you got this year, but it really should be between the January 1st, December 31st of 2017, since you're applying for the 2018 PACE on what you did between January 1 through December 31st. I hope that answered your question. Okay, any more questions? Great. Okay, Dan says great. And any more questions, again, you can use the chat box or you can just unmute your phone and ask. I need to talk. So the nomination should not contain a lot of old information. And this is what happens if you don't update from last year's submission. Sometimes chapters rely on the previous year as a template, and they don't realize they are not addressing a change in the current criteria. The nomination should contain what the chapter did the previous calendar year, as we've already discussed. Someone should be using the criteria throughout the year, documenting the things the chapter has done, or create a chapter PACE committee and break down the criteria into teams to work on. I know a lot of chapters, and especially the larger chapters, do have a team working on this, but there are some chapters that have a team of one. So this is hard, and it's something that I would suggest you need to, if you are that team of one, you need to start working on it. Keep the PACE criteria with you. Look at it. Document throughout the year. It will be hard, but it will also be rewarding. And as you're documenting this throughout the year, it might influence others to commit to getting some of the criteria done for you. To make sure the judges see all the documentation, present it in the order of the criteria. Judges don't like to have to go around and look for the information. They don't like that. They don't have the time. They want you to go in order. And make sure that you address everything under the categories. Your executive summary should be the first document they see before the criteria. You can put a chapter, a letter from your chapter president at the very beginning of your submission. That doesn't count toward the page limit. And but then you should go right into your summary, and then followed at that by your criteria. You can, as Pam had mentioned, you can request to have a chapter example sent to you from me. You can also request to have a chapter with years of experience mentor you. If you happen to be a very new chapter to this and you would like to talk to someone, have someone talk to you about this, we can arrange that. And also, please be aware that if you receive a letter of concerns and you don't address those concerns in your nomination next year, you might find yourself again with a letter of regret. Should you get a letter of regret, please don't be discouraged, but try again. As you heard Louisiana Chapter, they tried again. They've been successful. We want you to take that letter and regrets and work out a way to solve the issues outlined and try again next year. Again, I would suggest you request PACE nominations that other chapters have submitted to help to see how they address that criteria or that area of need that your letter had outlined. Best practices. There is a document that accompanies your PACE nomination called Best Practices. This is an Excel spreadsheet with a list of best practices recommended for a chapter, but is not a requirement for your chapter. The Best Practices guide the chapter to put in place ways to educate and increase their members' benefits and experience within the chapter and APWA. If you've looked at the best practices, you can see where they'll have categories such as membership development, and there are 10 things that we suggest that you can do to help increase and develop your membership. There's leadership development, committees and task force development, education, and special events. You should, it's pretty much checkbox, yes or no, or it's not applicable. If you do check no or non-applicable, you need to put in the comments why. They want to know why it's not applicable. They want to know why you haven't done something. So make sure that you do that, because that's just a part of good documentation. Does anyone have any questions? Am I going too fast? I don't want to be going too fast.
Yes, hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is South Carolina Chapter. On the best practices spreadsheet number 13, our delegate said there's no House of Delegates, and that form needs to, I guess, be fixed by national. Does that sound right?
Sure. We can definitely update that to the Council of Chapters. So when you see HOD, it should be Council of Chapters. They had a name change.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. We have somebody very detail-oriented on our board.
No, it says attends all Council of Chapters meetings and conference calls and regularly reports. Then it says HOD, House of Delegates deliberations, which is definitely just a typo on our part, or we should get that updated. So thank you for letting me know about that.
Okay, thanks.
Great.
Rhonda, hi, it's Mira with the Louisiana Chapter. After so going through what you just went through on the formatting for the application, last year when I was going through it, there was a lot of overlap in sections between so there were events that applied in multiple locations. How much liberty can we take in kind of like organizing it in a more, I guess, concise way?
Okay, maybe I'm not understanding it, but I would suggest, again, I'm looking at the PACE criteria right now, so when you go to membership and you go to A, document net membership gain and loss, go in that order. If you have to repeat yourself, maybe one thing deserves to be in a different area, you can either repeat it, or you can say under this section or this area. I wouldn't do that too often, because they're going to think you're not really addressing things. So I hope that answered your question about that. When you're saying
well, yeah, so what I did was I just referred to sections where the entire event was discussed that had multiple overlap between different criteria.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you can do that. You can do that as long as you're still addressing. If you get to a different section and they're still asking something that where you did, you can do that. I wouldn't do it a lot. I know if they're just, because then they're going to say, if you just keep saying refer to like a Part A or Part B, they're going to say, we want you to talk more about it. There's surely some other stuff. You can make that into like education outreach program. So if you just say, yes, we have a scholarship program, they're going to want you to talk about it. If you just say, well, we did our scholarship program at this meeting, see this meeting, they're going to think that you're not really documenting it, and that could trigger concern, a letter of concern. That helpful? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, when you request a sample from me, I look to see how large your chapter is. Then I go and get a sample that's around your chapter level. I try not to give, well, I know New England chapter's on here. It's one of our largest chapters. There's also Southern California. You know who you are. You're over 1,000 members. I try not to give that to a chapter who only has 200 or 300 because you're not going to be able to do everything a chapter. That's why you're not judged against another chapter. You're not going to be able to do what a chapter that has over 1,000 members can do. So I try to go with a chapter like, let's say, around 300 or 400 members and give that to you to look at when you request samples from me. So that's something else to be aware of. I'm going to try to give you an example, and you can look at that example. And I take notes. I take notes on what the committee likes and doesn't like about a certain nomination so that if I'm going to give you an example, I want to give you a good example. So that's one thing that I try to do when chapters request samples. Okay, we're going to move on, but still ask questions. So to obtain a copy of your best practices, you're going to find it beside the PACE criteria. You're going to go to apwa.net or click on the About tab. As you see on the front page, I have those circled here on the slide. And once you click on About, you're going to see Awards. And then when you see Awards, you're going to click on that, and you're going to get Awards, Criteria, and Forms. This is going to take you to the spot on the website where you will find the criteria, your best practices, where it says Chapter BP form, that's best practices, and a Submit Online button. Once you hit Submit Online, you will be taken off the APWA website and onto our awards software vendor's website. You will need to assign yourself a username and password. You're no longer on APWA. Your APWA username and password will not work. But you're just going to simply assign yourself your own username and password. I cannot look up your password. So it's sort of like here at APWA, if you don't remember your password, you're going to have to go in and we're going to have to get another password for you. But once you do that, you can then log in to upload your nomination. So that was a brief run through. A lot of you who are awards chairs, you've done this. You already know how to go online and submit, but I wanted to include that for anyone viewing this after the fact. Do we have any additional questions on anything PACE related? Again, you can use the chat box or just unmute your phone. Okay, I wanted to put out my contact information there for anyone who would like to contact me. Also, we're going to be probably reviewing the PACE again here shortly. So if you have any recommendations on something you would like changed, I can take that forward to the committee when the committee starts reviewing the PACE award on whether or not it gets done, whether or not it happens. That's entirely up to the board. The board has the final say. So the last time we updated the criteria, it was for the year 2015 to take effect, I think in 2016. That is on my memory. I don't have the note in front of me. But we tried to review the awards, all of the awards, every 3 years. So the third year is coming up that we need to start reviewing the PACE again. So if you have any recommendations that you would like to see changed, if you think that something needs to be added, please send me an email there at rwellhite@apwa.net. And if we do not have any further questions, this webcast is finished. And I want to thank everyone for attending. And if you have any questions, again, there's my phone number, there's my email address. Thank you.